It had been 2 years since Albert's world came crashing down around him. He had been blissfully happy with his girlfriend Lydia, or so he thought. They had dated for 3 wonderful years, moved in together, and were even talking about getting married and buying a house together. Life was perfect, or it seemed that way on the surface at least. Then Albert came home from work one day and found Lydia packing her bags. He stood in the doorway staring at the scene before him in disbelief. Lydia looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "Albert, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice cracking. "I've been seeing someone else for months. We're moving away together to the other side of the country." Albert felt his heart drop to his stomach. He had no idea what to say or do. He took a deep breath, trying to process the information. Lydia continued packing. "I love him, Albert," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, but it's over between us." Albert felt a wave of anger and betrayal wash over him. He clenched his fists, trying to keep his emotions in check. He knew he had to say something, but the words wouldn't come. He just stood there watching as Lydia packed her belongings. Lydia looked at Albert one last time, her eyes filled with regret. She finished packing and left the house, leaving Albert alone with his thoughts. He stood there for a long time, trying to make sense of what had just happened. He knew he would never forget this day, the day his world came crashing down. Albert spent the next 2 years drinking himself into oblivion. He started right after Lydia left. He would sit alone, steadily working his way through his liquor stash as memories of Lydia flooded his mind. Some nights he drank until he passed out, collapsing on the couch or the floor wherever he happened to be sitting. Other nights he lay awake, staring at the ceiling and feeling nothing but emptiness. His family and friends tried to reach out, leaving messages and stopping by to check on him. Albert pushed them away, insisting he was fine even as the drinking consumed him. He started calling in sick to work, sometimes going days without leaving his apartment at all. Albert knew he was on a dangerous path, but the alcohol provided an escape from the pain and he couldn't make himself stop. After 2 years of watching Albert deteriorate, his family staged an intervention. They sat him down, pleading with him to get help as he stared at the floor in silence. He finally admitted he needed help. Albert checked into a 30-day rehab program and slowly began to get back on his feet. Though the heartbreak still lingered, he started rebuilding his life one day at a time. Albert completely stopped drinking. Slowly, he started to feel more clear-headed than he had in years. He returned to work, apologizing to his boss for his reduced productivity and sloppy work ethic. He was actually surprised he even still had a job after all the shit he pulled. His performance quickly improved as he regained focus. After a month, Albert was functioning better than ever at work. He started socializing with coworkers after work hours, something he hadn't done in ages. They invited him to join their weekend softball league, and Albert rediscovered the simple pleasure of playing and joking around with friends. One weekend after a game, the team headed to a local bar. Albert ordered a soda as his teammates got beers. That's when he met a beautiful woman called Margot. Albert found himself enjoying Margot's company, and on a whim he asked for her number. He went home from the bar not expecting much to come of it, but soon he and Margot were texting regularly and had made plans to meet up. Margot was so easy to talk to, and Albert found himself opening up to her in ways he hadn't with anyone since Lydia. They would stay up late into the night chatting, and Albert felt himself looking forward to their time together. For the first time in years, he didn't dread the thought of letting someone new into his life. As the weeks went by, Albert knew he was developing real feelings for Margot. The apprehension was still there, but it no longer controlled him. He imagined what it could be like to have a relationship again, to have someone to share life with. Albert decided he owed it to himself to try. One night, after he dropped Margot off from a date, Albert worked up the courage to ask her to officially be his girlfriend. Margot's eyes lit up, and she enthusiastically said yes, kissing Albert deeply and asking him to spend the night. Albert walked up to her apartment with a renewed spring in his step, excited at the possibility of love again. Half a year with Margot went by, and Albert couldn't remember a time he had been happier. The past 6 months with her had been pure bliss. He felt fully himself when he was with her in a way he hadn't since before Lydia left. Margot made him laugh. She listened intently when he opened up, and she had a spark that drew Albert in. He found himself looking forward to their dates and long phone calls each night. For the first time in years, Albert felt whole again. Being with Margot was distinctly different from his relationship with Lydia. While Lydia had been passionate and exciting in the beginning, their connection never deepened much beyond the surface. Albert realized now they didn't communicate well or truly know each other on a deeper level. With Margot, it was the opposite. They talked for hours about their hopes, fears, and dreams. Albert felt safe opening up emotionally to Margot in a way he never quite did with Lydia. For the first time in a long time, Albert felt optimistic when he imagined the future. He pictured introducing Margot to his family, taking her on trips, building a home together. He knew without a doubt he was in love again, and it felt incredible. One day at work, Albert had been counting the minutes until he could see Margot. The excitement bubbled within him as he left early for the day, a surprise dinner plan in mind. He imagined her smile, the way her eyes would light up at the spontaneity of it all. Without calling ahead, he made his way to her apartment, a grin plastered on his face as he thought of her surprise and excitement when he showed up at her door with plans for a romantic night together. He knocked and the door swung open to reveal a man, bare-chested and damp from a recent shower, with only a towel slung low around his hips. Confusion clouded Albert's features for a moment, the smile faltering as he took in the stranger before him. He heard Margot's voice call out from inside of the apartment. "Is that the food delivery?" Albert's confusion morphed into anger. He pushed past the near-naked man and stormed into Margot's apartment. Margot walked out of her bedroom wearing nothing but panties and socks. She stopped short when she saw Albert standing there, her face draining of color. "Oh shit," Margot muttered under her breath. She crossed her arms over her exposed body and stammered, "Albert, I can explain." Albert felt like his blood was boiling. His hands shook with adrenaline and hurt. But he managed to keep his voice steady. "Don't bother explaining," he said coldly. "I think this situation speaks for itself." He turned to leave, but Margot rushed over and grabbed his arm. "Albert, wait," she pleaded. "Can we talk about this? It was a mistake, it didn't mean anything." Albert yanked his arm free from her grasp. "We're done, get the fuck off me," he said. And with that, he walked out, slamming the door behind him. He stood there staring at his feet, trying to catch his breath. He heard muffled voices from behind the door in Margot's apartment. The other guy was probably wondering what the hell had just happened, and why Margot was now crying. Whatever. Albert looked up and jumped in surprise. The food delivery guy was standing patiently in front of him, waiting to make their delivery. Half an hour later, Albert was sitting in his car in a parking lot, crying and eating Chinese takeout. He'd turned his phone off after having it blow up with calls from Margot saying things like, "I'm so sorry and please talk to me, I can explain." And, "Did you take our food delivery?" Tears continued streaming down his face as he shoved forkfuls of lukewarm chow mein into his mouth. He couldn't believe this had happened to him again. After Lydia had shattered his trust, he never thought he would allow himself to be so vulnerable again. Yet here he was, heartbroken and betrayed once more. As he chewed angrily, Albert contemplated his pattern of failed relationships. What was it about him that drew in unfaithful women? Was he too trusting, too willing to see the good in people, or was it just that women don't have the ability to be faithful? He refused to continue this cycle of disappointment. From now on, he would look out for himself first. The naive, romantic part of himself, the part that yearned to share his life with someone, was dead. Albert made a vow right there in the parking lot that he was done with relationships for good. A month later, true to his word, Albert had made huge changes. He had quit his job and sold most of his possessions, keeping only what he could fit into a single suitcase and backpack. He didn't care. He was leaving this all behind. After settling his accounts, Albert booked a one-way ticket to Europe. He was ready to wander, to fully embrace the unknown. This trip was exactly what he needed to find himself again. As Albert stood in line at the airport, ticket in hand, he felt no sadness or regret, only relief. He was finally free to live life on his own terms. Albert took a deep breath as he stepped up to the gate. No matter what happened next, he knew he would never return to the city again. It held nothing but pain. Albert was focused solely on the future now, a future filled with adventure, new experiences, and most importantly, no relationships. This was his chance to start fresh. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed creating it for you. Your support means everything to me. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing, giving it a thumbs up, and hitting the notification bell. Until next time, take care and stay awesome.